thanks for joining us today in honor of Earth Week. I am going to take you on a virtual tour of the refuge trails. Come and join me. So this facility over here is actually our cages for our permanently injured wildlife. So definitely take a look when you come over for a walk. All right, so our first stop is of course the map. It's always good to take a look at our map, especially if you're unfamiliar with our trails, and you can map out where you'd like to walk. So today we're gonna walk around Old Ice Pond right here. And if you're looking at one of our marked trail maps, that's actually our green trail. So we have three main marked trails: a red trail, which is our longest trail, a yellow trail, and then our green trail. So today we're just going to take a short walk around Old Ice Pond. And if you're wondering how it got its name, Old Ice Pond actually was named that because the refuge was previously home to the Quogue Ice Company. So this pond was actually a man-made dredged pond. It was kind of a wetland habitat, and they created a dam. We're going to walk along the dam today, but definitely stay tuned to our Nature News series because we will be doing some more nature history and refuge history. But Old Ice Pond was an ice harvesting pond. Pretty neat, right? And we're going to walk through a whole variety of different habitats. You can see we've got a big selection of habitats here. We're going to point out some very interesting plants and some animals that may use those areas as a habitat. So welcome to our field. Sometimes we refer to this habitat as the desert, and we'll talk a little bit about why. Come look. So if you look beneath your feet, you can see this is a very sandy and dry habitat. Sometimes people actually ask us if we put some of the sand here on the refuge property. Does anybody know how the sand got here from Long Island? Glacial deposits, right? So we have a variety of different habitats. This habitat is perfect for this plant right here. It's called the prickly pear cactus. And many of you have probably watched our nature series. You might have seen some of our turtles and tortoises. They have favorited this food. So this is a great area for lots of turtles and tortoises to come into because there's a food source right here. Cactus pads have a lot of water in them and nutrients. They also grow a really beautiful red fruit. You might have seen this in your grocery store. The prickly pear fruit grows right on top of the cactus pads, and that's a good source of nutrients for them too. But another reason why turtles and tortoises like this habitat is they'll come out from the pond to lay their eggs, and in this sandy soil with the heat that comes down, it's a much more open area, so the ground gets nice and warm. They will like to deposit their eggs and nests over in this area. But we do have some man-made homes in our field as well. So our lower boxes along the back line of our field are actually for eastern bluebirds, but sometimes they are used by house wrens, mostly used by house wrens actually. And then we have some big, a lot of the kids refer to these as big bird hotels up top. And those are actually built for a bird, a beautiful bird called the purple martin. We like to attract purple martins to habitats like these because purple martins are insect eaters. They're very amazing and agile and swift in the air, and they will capture lots of insects. So they're helpful to have around. We've got some gourd ones up too. Those are good for lots of swallows. And then tucked all the way in the back over here, we also have a bat house. Now, of the 9 species in New York State and about 7 on Long Island, all these species of bats are actually insect eaters. So our bats are consuming lots of insects. One of our common bats, called the little brown bat, one little brown bat can eat 1,000 mosquitoes in just 1 hour of the night. So bats are great at helping take care of really large insect populations. So they're very helpful to have around. So definitely think about introducing a bat box to your yard. All right, we're gonna walk through our field. As we walk through the field, it's a great spot to look for footprints and animal tracks. So we'll do that as we walk. So if you notice, all along this area right here, we have one of our glacial deposited plants. It's called bearberry, and bearberry is a ground cover that's found all over the refuge, especially up north on our trails in our sandier habitats. And bearberry is called that because it does grow a red berry typically underneath these leaves. So sometimes during different seasons you can see the berries, and it's a little more identifiable. The other plant that we have here that's very amazing, it's been around for quite a long time, is this one right here. And this one lacks roots, so I'm actually able to pick it up and show you. Just trying to take all these other plants that have kind of combined with it out. This one right here is called reindeer lichen. And this one does not have roots, and you can find these all over the refuge, and sometimes they'll be moved around by animals. They're called reindeer lichen because they're very light, and they say that the reindeer like to eat them, and that's why they can fly. All right, so you can see that the substrate beneath our feet has changed, what's above our heads has changed. We've entered into a different habitat now. So we are in now part of the Long Island pine barrens. So this is a primarily pine habitat. You can see these big tall trees up above our head, and they still are green. A lot of our plants right now during our walk are not green, but our pines are. Why? Because they are evergreens. So they're green all year round. So they're unlike deciduous trees that lose their leaves during the fall and the winter time. So we have mainly 2 different types of pine trees here at the refuge. We have white pine and we have pitch pine. And there are some easy ways to tell the difference between the 2, and I'm going to show you them right now. So first, I want to try to find some different pine needles and some different pine cones. Those are the easy ways to tell the difference. Oh, how convenient! I found one of each planted perfectly by this tree. So the cone on this side right here, this elongated cone, is from a white pine. This one right here is from a pitch pine. So you can see they're very, very different in shape and size. And what are pine cones? Pine cones are seeds. So some animals will also ingest these seeds. They'll move them from place to place, and they'll deposit them in different areas. So you might see pine cones that have been mostly eaten by animals. But the pitch pine, oh, here's one that was mostly eaten by animals. There you go. Lots of squirrels like to eat them. So the pitch pine actually has also some really cool specialized cones that are really tightly woven, and they're sealed up. They're kind of spiky to the touch. They're called serotinous cones, and these plants are really have this insane adaptation. Serotinous cones actually only open up during extreme heat, like wildfires. So what happens is a wildfire may come through an area like this, and what it does is it wipes out, primarily if it's a low intensity wildfire, it will wipe out mostly all the underbrush. But that is helpful to the pitch pine plant because this will pop open, deposit seeds in the ground, and now those little tiny saplings do not need to compete with all of the underbrush and all of the growth that's around them, because that's been wiped out. So they get lots of resources to themselves. They might get some more sunlight to themselves all the way down on the ground, and that gives them an opportunity to grow. So it's an amazing adaptation that these trees have. So the other way to tell the difference is by looking at the pine needles. So one thing is just when you feel the difference in the pine needles, white pine needles are a little more pliable and a lot softer. But if you gather just one little bunch from this area, let's pick a good one little cluster, and they're kind of attached with this little stem area right here. If you have a white pine, you will have 5 needles per cluster. The way we can remember that is white, W-H-I-T-E, 5, right? White pine, 5 needles per cluster. If we were to gather a pitch pine leaf, let's see, or cluster of needles, you see they're clustered together like this. Pitch pine has 3 needles. And we have a cool way to remember that too. Pitch, maybe some of you like baseball. How many pitches does a pitcher have to throw to strike someone out? 3 strikes and you're out, right? So 3 needles per bunch for a pitch pine. Easy to remember, right? So most of our forest here in the refuge is made up of pitch pines, but we'll talk about a couple other plants as we keep on walking. All right, so this habitat is kind of a swamp, marshy habitat. During the summertime, you'll see it's filled with lots of lily pads, and it's a good habitat for a lot of different animals. You'll often, during the summer, as it gets warmer, see a big snapping turtle that likes to sit right here, so make sure you give it its space, right? But lots of frogs inhabit this area. It's a good habitat for lots of water striders, water boatmen, and other cool insects. But there's some really cool plants around this area too that I'd like to point out. So another evergreen plant, many of you have probably heard of this plant in your wintertime songs. Very, very spiky and rough leaves, which the cuticle or the outside of these leaves really helps it during the wintertime. This is called holly. And some of our holly plants will grow red berries. So another very spiky plant is right up above our heads. This is called hawthorn. And hawthorn, I don't know if you can see it in the camera. Maybe I can pull one down for you, Kim. Can you zoom into this one? Oh. So hawthorn has these gigantic spikes. And then between the spikes, it will grow its leaves and its flowers and its berries. So animals, small animals, will utilize this plant for its food. Sometimes animals are even known to utilize its thorns. And then, do you see what's happening up there in this tree? There's a nest. So small animals can make nests in trees like this because they can avoid predators and evade predators. Because a larger predator, if it tried to move through this tree, it would hit lots of the thorns and the spikes. But a small bird could hop over and in between, or a smaller animal, right? So it's a helpful plant to lots of animals. All right, let's go to our bridge. All right, so right here, everyone is always a little bit confused about why there's still a bridge that goes through this habitat. This is a very, very special habitat called a bog. Some of you may have never heard of a bog. We have some bogs in in a couple different areas on Long Island, but they're very unique in the plants that they have inside of a bog, the plants that you can find here. We're going to talk about just a few. So basically, I like to describe a bog as a big giant sponge, and there's all this water that's running beneath it, and within it. So a lot of what makes up the bog, if you zoom in over here, is moss, mainly sphagnum moss. You can see it all over here. This is sphagnum moss. So if I push into the sphagnum moss, there's lots and lots of water beneath here. It holds a lot of that moisture in, which is why it's a very unique habitat. Some ecologically rare plants can grow here. One of the plants that you can find here is cranberries. So you might have heard of cranberry bog. Cranberries grow in these wet bog habitats. So there's a cranberry right there. We also have some really rare orchids that grow in our bog. And we even have carnivorous plants. It means that they are meat-eating plants. So one of the main carnivorous plants that we have is called the pitcher plant. I do think we have kind of some dried up pitcher plants somewhere over here, right? Maybe we can zoom in that cluster over there. Can we get it in there, Kim? So pitcher plant is like a big pitcher of water, a big cup of water. So within pitcher plant, it has this round opening, and there's water down beneath it. So lots of animals like to come in and take a sip of water. What's also really amazing about pitcher plant is pitcher plant has fluorescence. So when it's nighttime, certain insects can pick up UV light. And the pitcher plant within it has basically a giant target, a neon sign that's saying, come on into me, take a sip. And every insect is then attracted, like a big target, down into that pitcher plant. But that's not just water, it's actually digestive fluids of the plant. So when an insect lands in there, it often gets trapped in the very acidic fluid, but also there's small little hairs that line the whole inside of the pitcher plant that make it very difficult for the insects to climb out. So it traps them within and it actually consumes them. Pretty amazing plant. And I don't know if you could see them that well, but definitely look them up. They're not very big in size, just kind of small in size. We also have another carnivorous plant that you can only see during certain times of year, but it's only about the size of your pinky nail, a very, very small plant, and it's called sundew. Sundew works more like a Venus flytrap, and it has all these little hairs on the outside, and it will snap shut and close on small little gnats and flies and consume them those ways. It's a pretty neat habitat, and it is a protected habitat. We have some restoration projects that go in our bog as well. Very cool. So now you may have noticed that we've got a lot more underbrush in this area of the refuge. A lot of our green underbrush, these are evergreen plants. This one right here is called inkberry. And you can see it's got an inky color berry. During the summertime and the springtime, as this tree that's kind of within our inkberry starts to grow, you see this one is just now starting to get its buds, right? Starting to grow those leaves. This one very often gets confused with inkberry because this grows an inky blue colored berry. What do you think it is? It's blueberry. And here on the refuge, we have low bush blueberry, we have high bush blueberry, so we have two different types of blueberry trees. And a lot of people always ask us if we pick our blueberries, if we harvest them, if we gather them. We do not do that here at the refuge. A big part of the reason why is That's why we have so many animals that live on our property. They're here for the animals, and they're very important to many animals. But also, you may have noticed, even just in this short segment, we talked about cranberry, blueberry, inkberry, red berries of bearberry, red berries of holly bushes, so many berries. Some berries are edible, some are not. And blueberries look just like inkberries. Inkberries are not edible, while blueberries are. So you have to be very, very careful if you were to ingest a berry. So we do not recommend it, right? There's also a really cool plant growing beneath these trees too, another berry plant. I wish we had some smell-o-vision, because this one you can really recognize by the smell if you break the berries or the leaves. They grow red berries beneath the leaves, and you might know what this one is. It's called wintergreen. A lot of people think that this one is poison ivy though, because it often grows 3 leaves, and they're kind of shiny leaves. So sometimes it's confused for poison ivy, but it's covering all over the refuge. It is called wintergreen. And why is it called wintergreen? Because it's green during the winter time, right? Another evergreen plant. All right, so we come up against another plant right now. And this plant is lacking its leaves right now. It's a deciduous plant. It's called a scrub oak. This one right above us is a scrub oak as well. You can see it has held on to some of its leaves. Oaks often do. But I stopped at this plant because I actually wanted to point out something that is growing all over it. You can see these round woody growths. These are actually, shaking it on you. These are called galls. And galls are made by insects called gall wasps. And they're actually really incredible, because what those insects do, what those wasps do, is they'll irritate the bark of a branch, and they'll often lay their eggs either beneath the bark, sometimes in a flower or other parts of the tree. They'll lay their eggs, but they do have chemicals in their bodies and their saliva that they're releasing. And what happens is in these areas that they're irritating, the tree has to form some sort of reaction to it. So some galls, they call these areas on some galls a physiological sink. And what that means is the tree forms a reaction that's pumping lots of nutrients and lots of resources to this weird area, this weird unknown source, these weird chemicals that are in it, and it's pumping nutrients to this area. And what happens is you get these abnormal tissue growths. So you get these woody growths on a tree like this, but a gall on another tree may look crystallized. A gall may look fleshy or fungusy. Some of them are fuzzy. They can range in color. Some of them are white. Some of them are pink. Some of them are yellow. So there's all different galls based on the tree that they're on and the gall wasp that made them. So you might walk along the refuge. There's so many different signs of wildlife. Some are very small, just like this. Alright, so this last leg of the trail is actually the dam that was created for Old Ice Pond. So this is an earthen dam, and they built it up on both sides. So you'll see as we walk along, there is water on each side. It's kind of a wetland habitat on this side. It is our pond habitat on this other side. But the dam was created because the previous location of the ice harvesting company was actually across the street, and it was dammed for ice harvesting actually at Montauk Highway. So at that, what is now an overpass, at that area, it was actually a dam. When they changed regulations, they could no longer harvest ice over there because it wasn't a suitable place for ice harvesting. So they created a dam right here along this trail. And so Old Ice Pond over here is only about 2 to 3 feet deep in most areas, and really only about 5 or 6 feet at its deepest. So it was a better spot for ice harvesting. The islands that you see now in Old Ice Pond were man-made when ice harvesting ceased production by the creation of mechanical refrigeration. When it ceased production, they donated a portion of the land to conservationists that were particularly interested in breeding and conserving waterfowl like the black duck, the symbol of the refuge. So these islands were created as protective areas that the ducks and the waterfowl could breed. So we're gonna walk along this area, talk about a couple more plants. If you're a birder, this is a great spot to see a lot of birds. We have a lot of beautiful birds, some that are here all year round, some that migrate through. Old Ice Pond has lots of waterfowl like other ducks that migrate here just for the winter time. So many really rare and unique ducks. And look who we've spotted over this way, Mr. Tony!
Round 2.
So many of you probably recognize Mr. Tony from some of our nature news series or some of our programs here at the refuge. He's also one of our environmental educators. And it looks like he's doing a little work on this habitat that we call our spillway. So we call it the spillway. We'll come take a look over here. So when the refuge pond gets to a certain height, what happens is it comes down through this area under our feet and comes out the other side. So Old Ice Pond is what we call a freshwater pond, but all of the water has to go somewhere, right? So all of the water, as it fills with rainwater and snow melt, comes down through beneath our feet and out the other side. And as this stream goes along, it turns into Quantuck Creek and Quantuck Bay, and eventually out into the ocean. So it turns from freshwater to brackish water, a mixture between fresh and salt water, and then salt water. So these are cool habitats because they have some different animals that can exist in saltwater habitats, in brackish water habitats, and in freshwater habitats, just in a small little space. So if you look along this area of the refuge, you might notice a lot of different growth of plants, especially during the summertime. You can see there's lots of vines that come out through this habitat. And along this last trail that we took on the dam trail, you might have seen lots of kind of bamboo-like sprouts along the trail. And these are what we call invasive species. So they're species that don't exist here naturally, but they were brought over here, and they often outcompete our native plants. So these vines, like wisteria vine, or these woody growth like plants, which are reeds called Japanese knotweed, kind of like bamboo. They grow very fast. They grow in extreme ways, like Japanese knotweed grows in long rhizomes beneath the ground. This grows and takes over all of these plants and steals the resources. So it's important that we always plant native. We make sure that if we're ever moving a plant, we're taking care of it the right way. We're not reintroducing or introducing a plant that may not be native to an area, right? So this is a habitat we call chocolate pudding pond. And it's because it is a chocolatey pudding color. And check out our mallards that are using chocolate pudding pond. So that's a male mallard with the green head. And the mottled colored one is a female mallard. And this is breeding season for our mallards, so they're all paired up. So chocolate pudding pond gets its chocolatey color, one, because of a lot of the organic matter that's down beneath the surface, but also because a lot of our areas on the refuge are actually fed by ground springs. And you can see that some places it will bubble a little bit, but other places, like back deep in there, you can see kind of rust-like deposits. And that's often a sign of a ground spring, because what's happening there is there are iron oxidizing bacteria that live within the water, and they are formed by the iron around the ground springs. And when they consume the iron, they turn it into rust. So you can see that happening in some of these areas. Now, a lot of people worry with the bacteria, with the rust coloration, that it could be harmful, could be toxic. It's not at all, but what happens is if something like this got in your pipes, you might have heard like that, your water pipes, all the rust can build up, and that can be a problem. Not really that it's not potable. It is actually still drinkable water. As you can see, our little ducks dabbling. You're searching for some food. There's lots of frogs that you can find in here, just like our swamp habitat we saw before. Lots of water striders. And our summer camp likes to go in here and explore and find some of that wildlife. All right, I have one last plant for y'all. All right, you may recognize this plant. It is called skunk cabbage. And again, I really wish there was smell-o-vision for this one, but maybe you at home have already smelled this plant. So skunk cabbage is one of the first plants to actually come out during the springtime. You can see this one has just started to grow. And it can come out so early. Some squirrels running around. It can come out so early because skunk cabbage actually produces its own heat. Isn't that incredible? So skunk cabbage stores up starch and sugars in its roots and its rhizomes and its stem all winter long, and then when it uses that energy up, that sugar up, it actually releases heat. So it will often melt the snow around it, and you can see these sprouting up even when the snow is still on the ground. And skunk cabbage is called skunk cabbage because it smells like skunk. It has this garlicky, skunky smell, especially if you break the leaves. There are some animals that consume it though, and you can see there's pieces of some of the leaves missing. Lots of goslings or baby geese will consume these leaves. Sometimes deer will consume these leaves. And they have a very strong smell. There's also, we'll zoom into them, I think we have a bigger cluster over there. But this little plant coming up here is called a fiddlehead. And I think we'll go to a better cluster in just a moment. All right, these plants right here are called fiddleheads, and you might recognize what a fiddlehead turns into. When a fiddlehead unfurls, it curls open and actually turns into a fern. And some fiddleheads are edible. But they look like the top of a violin or a fiddle, right? And they will round open, and they'll unfurl all of their leaves and turn into a beautiful fern. We have a couple of different types of fern here at the refuge. We have cinnamon fern, Christmas tree fern. Any others, Kim? I think we have a couple more. Bracken fern. See, Kim knew. But we want to thank you for joining us today. We hope you all enjoyed your nature walk. Hopefully you can get out into nature on your own. But until then, hopefully this kind of fed your appetite, right? Have a good day, everybody, and have a good Earth Week.